Hello, my name is Steve Bowler and welcome to the Juniper vLabs lab number 2. In this video, we're going to be configuring and explaining security zones and how to set up a trust zone. So in this lab, we are going to provide the initial configuration files for the devices that we use on GitHub. We're going to give that link in the video in the description. We're going to explain the basics about security zones. We're going to configure a trust security zone. We're going to also apply a security policy to the vSRX firewall to allow communication between two devices. And we're going to perform show commands on the firewall to verify proper connectivity and to help troubleshoot issues. So this is going to be the layout of the video, of the network, rather. So we're going to have two hosts. They're going to be VMXs acting as endpoints. We're going to have the vSRX in the middle, and it's going to be the firewall that provides the connectivity between host 1 and host 2. So let's go to our workspace. And if you're new to vLabs, we explain in the Juniper vLabs lab number 1 how to gain access to the vLabs portal. And once you have access to the portal, if you scroll down to the security labs, you'll see the zones policy lab. We're going to go ahead and launch that. So we've already launched that so that you don't have to wait. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes for the lab to start up. So the first thing we're going to do in this lab is we're going to try to ping from host 1 to host 2, and that should not be successful. What we're going to do first on the vSRX is we're going to SSH to it, and we're going to pull out some of the configuration, the security zone configuration and the policy configuration. So that's already pre-built when you launch the lab. So we're going to take that out of the vSRX. So let's do that now. And so the reason we're doing this is to show you step by step how to configure a security zone, how to configure a security policy, and to get communication between two devices set up. But in order to do that, we have to delete some of the configuration from the lab. So let's go into configuration mode. I'll go ahead and apply the changes. We'll do a commit and quit on the SRX. Then we'll go back and we'll fire up host 1. And then using the layout, host 1's IP address is going to be it's going to be 10.100.12.2. So we're going to go ahead and try to ping that. We should not have reachability to that. So let's go ahead and try that first. If we go to the VMX, host 1, let's do a ping 10.100.12.2. Again, what we're trying to ping is host number 2. Let's do a rapid count of 10. And as you can see, those pings are not successful. And that is because of the inherent nature of the firewall. By default, if there are no security zones set up on the firewall or security policies, then the ping will fail. So let's go to the vSRX. We'll start doing some configuration. What I like to do is, if we do a show interface description, there's no descriptions on the interfaces. If we do show interfaces terse, we can see that gig 000 is going to the host 1, which is the VMX1, and then gig 001 is going to host 2, which is on the 12 network. So we'll go ahead and set those up. We'll just create a simple interface description. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to show you, we're going to do a monitor interface on gigi 000, and this is just going to show traffic. First thing we'll do, we'll just do a clear interface statistics on gigi 000, and then we'll start the monitor. Then we'll start the ping from host 1 to host 2. So again, in this lab, we're just going to use host 1 and host 2. We're not going to use host 3 in the untrust zone. We haven't created that yet. We're going to do that in vLab, the Juniper vLabs number 3. Let's go back to host 1. We'll do another ping. And then if we go to the vSRX, we can see that we're seeing input packets. But the ping still fails. So let's go ahead back onto the vSRX. And I'm going to show you a command you can do, show security packet drop records. It's a pretty neat command that allows us to see traffic that the firewall is dropping by policy. So if we look at the first few entries, we have a ping from 11.2, which is the host 1 IP address of the gigi 000 interface. And then we should see the packets being dropped or discarded to 12.2. So back on the vSRX, that's exactly what we see. 11.2 to 12.2. The protocol is ICMP, and it's being dropped. And the reason is because there's an invalid zone. Why is there an invalid zone? Because there are no zones. So that's the first thing that we're going to create is our security zone. We're just going to call it trust. And then we can go ahead and hit enter there. And if we do a show security zones, let's just do show security zones. And we see that we have the security zone trust created now. But we don't have, the next thing that we need to do is to add interfaces to the security zone. So we'll go ahead and do that. We're going to use the host 1, the interface that's associated with host 1, that's going to be 000. And then we're also going to put into the security zone 001, which is the interface going to host 2. So the next step in the process is to put under the security zone what type of traffic we want to allow. So we're going to go under the security zone trust. We'll do a question mark. We have a lot of options Here, what we want to do is the host inbound traffic. If we do a question mark, we see that we have protocols and system services. If we select system services and do a question mark, you can see that we have the ping service. So we're just going to do that for simplicity for this lab. So I'm going to go ahead and add ping. So now if I do a show security zones, you see that we have the trust security zone, the host inbound traffic system services, where we are going to allow ping. And then we have the two interfaces that host 1 and host 2 are in. So let's leave it at that. Let's go back to host 1, and we're going to go ahead and try to ping. We'll do a rapid count of 10. We'll go back to the vSRX. We'll do a commit to save this configuration. You see that we have this message that comes up. Don't worry about that. We can still add these configurations and they are going to work. So from the vSRX, if we do a show, if we just do the up arrow and go to show security packet drop records, it's going to show us that right now we've got 20 records. We can clear the records if we do it clear security packet drop records. And then if I do a show, there's 0 records. So for troubleshooting purposes, you may want to do this. Obviously, this is a very simple setup with this firewall. There's basically no traffic passing through it. If you're on a test firewall or a production firewall, you're going to want to be more granular and careful in what you are doing. You probably don't want to clear all the records for security sakes, and then you may want to match on specific IPs, and you can do that. So I'll go back to host 1. We'll start that ping, and we'll go back to the vSRX, and you can see that the traffic is being denied again. We have 21 packets that came in and only 1 packet that returned. So that is not good. That's basically telling us that something else is still wrong with this setup. So if we go to the vSRX and we do the show security packet drop records command again, so this time what we get is traffic from host 1, which is 11.2, going to 12.2. The ICMP traffic is being dropped by policy. So it's a different error this time. We're not seeing the zone error. We're seeing the policy error. So what this means is that even though we have both of the interfaces in the same security zone, we have the traffic defined that we want to allow, we still need to create a security policy to allow traffic to traverse and to be allowed inside the same zone. So that's the trusted zone. So what we're going to do now is create that security policy. So let's go back into configuration mode. We will now define our security policy. So we do that by doing the command set security policy, set security policies. If we do a question mark, we have lots of options. We have to specify the zones in which the traffic is traveling in between. So in this case, it's going to be from zone trust to zone trust. If we do a question mark, Now we have to name the policy. So in this case, we'll just do allow ICMP. It's also good to always name your policy, whatever you're trying to allow. So in this case, it's ICMP. If you're working on a ticket, you might want to reference the ticket number so that the engineer or the technician who looks at the firewall can look at a security policy and easily identify what the policy is created for. So if we hit question mark after we've defined the policy name, you can see that we have options to match, and that's where we're going to create the destination address and source address. So we'll do match source address, and in this case we're just going to leave it pretty simple. We're going to say any source address, and then if you hit the up arrow and we want to match the destination address of any as well. So in a production environment, obviously you're not going to want to do this. You're going to want to match, you're going to want to create a policy that matches an IP subnet or an IP address specifically. But for ease and simplicity, we're going to just match all source and all destination addresses. So now that we have that defined, what we want to do is match what type of traffic. And we do that using the application statement. And then if we had a question mark, you can see that there's a bunch of predefined applications. In this case, we are going to use the Junos. I believe it's just Junos ping. There it is. So we'll do this one right here. But you can create applications as well. You can create like named applications where you call out specific ports that the customer is trying to, the customer has requested communication and data flows, data connections to. In this case, we're just going to use the predefined Junos ping application. So now that we have our match statements, if we do a show security policies and hit enter, you can see that we get a warning. So we have our match statements. We're matching any source to any destination. The application specifically, in this case, we're going to do ping, but we don't have a then statement. So let's look at that. So right after the policy, if we change it from match to then and hit question mark, you see that we have multiple options. We have a counter, we have a log, we have a reject, we have a deny, and we have a permit. In this case, we're going to use the permit. So let's go ahead and do that. Now if I do the up arrow and do show security policies, the policy looks good. So we're, again, matching from trust to zone trust. We're going to allow ICMP or ping traffic. And we're going to permit that. Let's go ahead and do a commit and quit. So there's another command that we can do. It's the show security policies hit count command. And what that's going to do is provide us with some information for the policy that we created. You can see that we have 0 hit count right now. If I go to the host 1 and I run that ping again, you can see that that ping was now successful. We're able to establish reachability from host 1 to host 2 across the vSRX firewall. If we go back to the vSRX, if I do an up arrow and look at the hit count, we now see that the policy count shows 10, and that matches the amount of the amount of times we tried to ping or how many packets we sent from host 1 to host 2. So this is good. Let's go ahead and test the policy that we created on the SRX. Let's just try to do an SSH. So we're going to try to use port 22 connection from host 1 to host 2. So if we do SSH 10.100 12.2 and hit enter, this should have responded right away with a prompt trying to get into host 2. And that is not what we see. So if we go onto the vSRX, we do a show. If we do a up arrow and go to the packet drop records, what we can see is the newest entries show a connection from 11.2 trying to be made to 12.2, and the port listed is 22 over TCP. And we can see that that has been dropped by policy. So the firewall is doing exactly what we want to do. It's blocking all other traffic except for the ICMP traffic. So let's go ahead and create a rule on the SRX. You can also do a show security flow session. Let's see if we can get this to work. Let's try the SSH again. And if we do the show security flow session, doesn't seem to be working. And I can explain that command in a different video. But the important thing to note here is I don't think the security flow session is going to work because the packet is being dropped by policy. Let's go ahead and create a policy. So this policy is going to be from zone trust to zone trust. Again, it's an inter-zone policy, or intra-zone, meaning it stays within the same zone. And we're going to give it the name allow SSH. We're going to match source address any. And we'll also do a match on the any destination address. So we'll make the same type of policy that we did for ICMP, but for SSH. Then we're going to match the application. I believe this is Junos SSH. Then the action is going to be to permit. So if we do a show security policies from configuration mode, we'll check our new policy, allow SSH. We're matching any source to any destination. The application is going to be SSH, and then we're going to permit that traffic. So let's go ahead and commit that. We'll quit. We'll go back to the VMX, and we're going to go ahead and try again. If we SSH to host 2, you can see now that we have a good connection. If we go back to the SRX and we do a show security policies hit count, you can see that we have one hit count on the allow SSH. So that looks good. And what I wanted to show you earlier is this command. We're going to go into more detail in this later. I could probably do a full video just on the security flow session command. But what this shows is security flows or sessions between a source and destination traversing the firewall. So we show traffic coming into the firewall from host 1, which is 11.2, going to 12.2 over port 22. And then we also see the returning traffic. And this is traffic coming back to the firewall from host 2 back to host 1. So this appears to be good bidirectional traffic flow. When this would be bad is when you see unidirectional traffic, which would be when you see packets coming into the firewall and then 0 packets returning to the firewall. That's when you would have an issue after the traffic hits the firewall. So we see this all the time in production environments, and it's a good, probably one of the best commands you can do for troubleshooting connections through a firewall. So this appears to be a good connection. What we'll do last in the lab is we'll just go back to our lab environment. We'll go to host 2, and on the VMX, we'll just create a user. So we'll do set system login user, and we'll just call it test. We'll go over how to create users and all that in another video. In this case, I'm just going to create one real quick. We'll just create the class as a read-only. So we're going to be restricting access to this user, and then we'll just use the authentication plain text password, and we'll put in a new password, or we will define the password for the user. So the reason I'm going to do this is to show a connection, a valid SSH connection. So if I go back to host 1, I'll cancel out of this. So I'll try to SSH over to host 2. And then I'm going to put in my username. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to show you is we created a user on host 2. And this is just to show a successful SSH connection into host 2. So I just went into host 2 and I created a user named test and created the password. And then I went into VMX, our host 1. And if I do an SSH over using the new user that I created, so SSH test2 10.100.12.2 and hit enter. It's asking me for a password. I'll go ahead and enter it. Hit enter, and now I'm at the host 2 command line, which is the VMX. So this appears to be a good connection. What we have presented is the policy, an SSH policy that allows traffic in from the trust zone. We created that connection. If we do a security flow session, we see that we have a lot more packets. And so this appears to be a good connection from host 1 to host 2 via SSH. So in this lab, what we showed you is how to create a simple security zone. We showed you how to apply policy to the zone. And we tested reachability via ICMP. We had 2 different policies. We had an ICMP policy and a SSH policy. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we will show you an untrust to trust policy. And that's going to be in Juniper vLab, lab number 3. So go ahead, you can play around with these policies. You can create whatever policies you want inside the zone. Just have some fun. We just kind of kept it simple for the sake of learning the basics. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.